Hey, folks. Welcome to the initial episode of the Taking the Lid Off podcast. I'm your host, Chad Ray Faulkner, and I'll be telling you a little bit about myself, but first I want to read something for you. To reach the goal, we must at times run with the wind, other times against it, but we must certainly run, not walk, nor stand still. I'll read that one more time. To reach the goal, we must at times run with the wind, other times against it, but we must certainly run, not walk, nor stand still. So that's a quote, and I'll hold up this little piece of paper for those watching on YouTube. That's a quote. It's from a little project I did, presumably, I think junior high or high school, probably computer class, but we had to do this little printout, and I have kept that thing since then. I don't know why or how I've actually even been able to keep up with it. I'm pretty good at keeping track of things, actually. But uh, it has stuck with me, and probably a good reason I'm sitting here before you now. But I think it's a really good quote. I don't know who said it. I looked it up. I tried to find out so I could give somebody credit for it, but I couldn't find it. So there it is. So, taking the lid off. Let me go ahead and start by talking about the name of the podcast. So, taking the lid off comes from from a movie quote from Rambo Last Blood. If you know anything about me, I'm a bit of really a Sylvester Stallone fan because I like Rocky, love the Rocky movies, love the Rambo movies. But I was watching Rambo Last Blood. I was by myself, and I'd to kind of back up, I'd been thinking about doing a podcast for quite a while, and one of the things that I didn't know was what was I going to name it? What was I going to call it? And I just kind of let it on the back burner, let it simmer, and was kind of walking by faith and not by sight on it, and kind of letting it come to me. And I was watching that movie, and so this is not a spoiler alert, but in that movie, there's a part where there's a girl that's his niece, and she's talking to him, and she wants to go see this friend in Mexico who knows where her dad is at, who's also in Mexico. And Rambo's been taking care of this girl for some time, and he also remembers this friend from before she moved to Mexico and doesn't think she's a good person. And his niece says, John, I've heard the stories about your past and everything. And I know you changed. And Rambo, basically had said that people don't change. He said, well, you changed. And Rambo says, no, I didn't. I'm just trying to keep a lid on it every day. And it hit me right then. And it may sound silly, but it hit me right then. I was like, keeping a lid on it as veterans, not to sound crazy, not to go all PTSD or anything. And we'll get into more of this meaning for me, but taking the lid off comes from keeping a lid on it, which I think is what a lot of us do. We keep a lid on it. And I'm not talking about the crazy or anything. Just military life, and especially, if you've deployed and we're in a combat job and in a combat zone and all those kinds of things, it's just different. And there's not life outside of it that replicates that. And that's where a lot of veterans have some issues and struggles and whatnot. And so some of us keep a lid on it. Again, we'll get into it. I don't want you to think it's any kind of crazy signal or anything like that. So I didn't want to call the podcast Keeping the Lid on It. I thought taking the lid off would be better. And so during the podcast, in some ways would be taking the lid off and talking about those things that we keep a lid on at times as veterans, and then just as people too, because I don't want to leave out firefighters, policemen, all these other people who have similar experiences. Okay, so kind of to lead in there, what we're going to be talking about, we are going to talk a lot of veteran-ish issues. I want to focus on leadership. I want to talk a lot about leadership and our experiences. I want to bring the veteran experience or the military life career experience to you all, to the audience, and help civilians understand us and get to know us better and what makes us tick and a lot of the skills that we bring to bear, because I think it's really misunderstood. I don't think a lot of civilians understand the depth of knowledge and just adaptability and leadership qualities and all the things that a veteran has that we bring to the table. And it's not their fault. So I don't think we do a good job of advertising and letting people really know what all kind of skills you gain in the military. And so we'll talk a lot about that. And that'll be a lot of different topics. So I want to talk about issues too that affect veterans, and it's everything from fitness. We're going to talk about fitness some. Guys they get out of the military, especially career guys like myself, 20 years, and they stop working out and they get fat and lazy. It is what it is. There's statistics out there that show this, and we'll probably get into that. So we're going to talk about fitness and some different things like that. Maybe a little nutrition, I don't know, just things like that. We'll talk about mental health. We'll talk about whatever that comes up. But again, a lot of leadership stuff too. And then I'm a firearms instructor now in my new chapter that I'm in right now. So there'll be the occasional. I want people to tell me what you want to hear as well. And I know people are going to want to hear about that kind of stuff. Firearms training, gear, whatever. I have a passion for instructing. So we'll talk about all that as well. And how we're going to talk about that. So kind of the structure of the podcast is going to be long form conversation. I'm going to interview and have people along with me, but I don't want to do question and answer, very robotic back and forth. I want it to be kind of long form conversation. And we're going to have some general topics that we'll talk about. But if we go down a rabbit hole, then we go down a rabbit hole, and that's okay. And we'll talk about some stuff, and we'll get back on track, and we'll make sure we get some good content out there. But I want it to be fun, too. I want to have a conversation. I want it to be intellectual, and I want to bring value to the listener. So we're this far in. Who am I? So Chad Faulkner, Chad Ray. I've got my ChadRayCoaching.com. You can go on ChadRayCoaching.com and see my bio there, and I'll tell you a little more about me. And you're going to get to learn more about me, whether you like it or not, during the podcast as we go along. So, but just generally, I grew up in a small town in Northwest Tennessee. Started working on a farm when I was like 13 years old. I was a Boy Scout. I was an Eagle Scout. Yeah, I know. And right out of high school, I joined the Army and went straight into basic training and all that. Was in the infantry. Did the infantry for about half my career, and the other half I was in special operations doing civil affairs work. And we'll get all into more of that later on. And then retired after 20 years, and here I am now. I moved. I was at Fort Bragg most of my career, and then I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee now. Love it out here. The mountains are great. The area is great. And I'm doing some firearms instruction out here, and life is good. But I kind of, I already kind of said why I wanted to do the podcast, but I've done some leadership presentations here in the area, mainly Pigeon Forge area, if you're familiar with the area, and I've kind of developed a passion for talking about leadership. I'm working on a leadership book, and then promoting veterans is something that kind of came along the way as far as people wanting to know about hiring veterans and whatnot. So we'll talk some of the hiring veterans pieces as well. And then future guests, a lot of future guests are going to be some of my prior folks that I've worked with. Real soon, I'm interviewing one of my former commanders, battalion commanders. I'm going to interview guys that I worked with, guys that worked for me. I want to talk to people in the leadership field. Some people out there that I don't know yet. I'm always looking for folks. I'll take suggestions of people to interview, but it's going to be a lot of people to start out with that I already know and have a relationship with, and it's going to be valuable. Trust me, it doesn't matter that these people are not well known or famous or anything like that. There's going to be some good content coming out of some of these interviews. I guarantee it. and I'm excited, and I can't wait. And I'm going to reach out to some more known people as we get going. I've just got to provide some value first, and then hopefully get some big names in here and get some good knowledge out there to you. I'm going to have, let's see, my buddy Tim Anderson and I are going to be some folks, the guy that I wrote the book with. If you're familiar, I wrote a book. It's called Original Strength for the Tactical Athlete. And my co-author there, Tim Anderson, him and I are going to have more than one podcast episode, guaranteed. Love talking to that guy. One of my best friends right now, and there's just going to be a lot, guys. And again, I'm looking for suggestions. So with that, I'll also in the future I'll be looking for sponsors too, hopefully. So if anybody has any suggestions on that as well, it'd be nice to have a little monetary value here to help pay for some upgrades, some better software, maybe some better equipment and whatnot. Kind of budget right now, but we'll get there. And I'll get better at all this editing and everything. And it's a journey, man. I love the process. You got to love the process and trust the process. So I'm excited. I'm looking forward to learning. I want to throw some thanks out there. Mechanics Hill Marketing, Dan and Joy, they've been absolutely great. They've helped me out a lot. My family, who's been holding down the fort. My wife's been cooking, cleaning, all that kind of stuff while I sit here and play with this computer and webcam and everything and learn how to do this. And thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I'm looking forward to it, guys. If you've got anything that you want to hear from me, anything else, let me know. I'm open to any suggestions. I appreciate you listening, appreciate you watching, and I'm looking forward to our journey together. Give me a subscribe so that you can keep up with me. If you like what you're hearing, give me a review, okay? 5 stars on iTunes is the way. What I'm understanding is that's kind of how you get noticed and heard. That's what helps your rankings and everything. So hit me up on there, guys. You can also find me at chadraycoaching.com or takingthelidoff@gmail.com. And that's where we're at right now. Look us up on Instagram, Taking the Lid Off. Twitter, it's @LidOff, but that's the Taking the Lid Off site. And then Facebook, we have Taking the Lid Off as well. So connect with me. Help me grow. I appreciate it, guys. Take care. Whatever you're working on, get it done.